Welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. Our mission is to share what we have learned from our experience and the experience of others to help you make more money investing like a pro. We want to teach you how to create wealth by investing in real estate the Discount Property Investor way. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. I am your host, David Dodge, and today I have an awesome guest on the show, Alex Jarbo. And Alex is a short-term rental developer and a manager. So he was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. He served in the Marine Corps for 4.5 years, where he was stationed in Washington, D.C. Apart from the Marine Corps' honor guard, he left the Marine Corps for 22 years old to pursue his career as a real estate professional. He is the founder and CEO of Sargon Investments, and he has a goal of developing 650 cabins in the next 3 years. Alex holds an MBA with concentration in real estate development and currently finishing a doctorate in business with concentration in leadership. He is the host of a YouTube channel called Alex Builds, where he teaches the ins and outs of short-term development and management. And Alex, I'm happy to have you, man. How are you today?
Oh, thanks for having me on, man. Super excited to be on.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. So I definitely wanted to get to know you a little bit more on this podcast and pick your brain about some of these short-term rentals and development and management. But before we get started into all that, just give us a brief history of what you've been doing in real estate, how long you've been in real estate, and just a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I mean, we can go back to like my military days of just like, so I sort of the end of my enlistment back in 2016. I decided that I had about 6 to 8 months left on my contract, didn't want to re-enlist into the Marine Corps. So I just started looking at reading up on different types of investing classes, stock market, crypto, real estate. Real estate really caught my eye. Just because I enjoyed the control that you could have over it, like with like forced appreciation and everything. So really went headfirst into that world. At that time, there were some multifamily books. There weren't really almost nothing on self-storage, short-term rental. So I've tried to read as much as I can in the different asset classes, the different real estate classes. And I originally had landed on a flipping mentorship when I was still in the Marine Corps. And I forgot how much it cost at that time, but I joined that. And what I realized was the person who had run that program, a lot of their long-term wealth was tied into short-term rentals. This was back again in 2016. So even back then, 6 years ago, it was still they were pretty heavily invested in short-term rentals. So I got him on the phone and I was like, I love the flipping model, but I'm here for like long-term wealth. Like I understand like you can make a lot of money in the flipping and a lot of people have. But I really like the short-term rental stuff. I like sort of just, I'm a host at heart. So he helped me decide on the city that I currently live in, just walked me through market analysis and everything. And so I currently live in Asheville, North Carolina. The day I got out of the Marine Corps, I got out of the Marine Corps and drove straight to Asheville. I had some money saved up, but didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of the short-term rental thing. So got my real estate license, and I just started looking for short-term rentals. And what I realized at that time was everything was either way out of my price range, or it was in my price range, but it wouldn't have done well as a short-term rental. Maybe it would have done well as like a long-term rental or putting a long-term tenant in there. But not necessarily, there wasn't really anything unique that was in my price range. So my very first real estate investment was actually a ground-up development short-term rental, permanent foundation stick-built house. So that's essentially how I got started. And that one property turned into two turned into four, brought on some investor capital, and just today we're developing 24. And like you said, we have the goal of developing 650 in the next 3 years.
Man, that's amazing. So tell me more about this first one. It's a single family home. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms?
Yeah.
How big of a house is it?
Yeah. So, I mean, just again, like I didn't really have too much money starting. So we got a second home loan, construction loan. And at that time, you can get them at 90%. And there is some hard money, but this was like permanent financing, fixed rate debt. And it was an it is, I'll never sell that property, but it's an 800 square foot A-frame, 2 bedroom, 1 bath that can sleep 6 people. So 2 bedrooms plus a queen pull-out couch. Yeah, we found the land. We got a really good deal on the land where it was 2 separate parcels, but they were being offered together. One side appraised for so much that the other side we essentially got for $1 at closing. So once that first one was built, we then went to the bank again and I went to a commercial bank and used that as collateral to qualify for another loan where we built 2 more on that land. But that first one, man, that first one's definitely been our cash cow. That first one last year did 84,000 in gross and 46,000 in net alone. Which, I mean, I consider that like a starting salary for anyone who's starting out.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some good numbers, man. I like to hear that. That's awesome. What websites are you guys advertising on to get the short-term tenants?
Yeah, so this is a model that we recently started changing in the last 6 months. So all my properties are they're on Airbnb and VRBO both. But what I've really started to focus on the last 6 months is building a direct booking platform out. So the best tool that I've used for that, it's a company called StayFi. That it's a little router it's a little disk that plugs into the back of your router, and it essentially create a landing page where your guest has to put in their email address to get access to the internet. So the guest comes from Airbnb, VRBO, then we capture their email addresses, and then we remarket to them to our own direct booking site.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Well, let's just talk about how has building been a benefit to you? So like, it seems to me like that was probably the easiest barrier to entry for you. And that's probably
right.
why you did that. Has everything that you've done with the short-term rental space been a new build, a ground up construction, or have you bought any homes or small multifamilies, or even done any type of arbitrage? Just curious.
Yeah, so I've done rental arbitrage. I'm actually a very part-time mentor coach to BNB Formula, which is all rental arbitrage mainly. So I'm a firm believer in the rental arbitrage model. That sort of helped me save up some money to do some of my other deals to get down payments on. So I've done that route. I started with the new development stuff, but I'll never I'll never pass on a deal if it's a good short-term rental deal. So a good example of that is we recently purchased a massive 3,200 square foot log cabin that had a detached garage that was wrapped like a log cabin. So we converted that into another unit, and it came with 4 acres. So we're going to develop 4 other cabins on that acreage as well. So I'll purchase properties for short-term rentals as long as they have some sort of acreage attached to them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Very, very cool. Let's see here. Do you sell the properties after they're built? It doesn't sound like you do. It sounds like you keep them all.
No, they're long-term holds, especially with our investors. Like our investors know that we're married to each other for 8 to 10 years, depending on what the market looks like at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I had mentioned here in your bio, Sargon Investments. Tell me a little bit about that. Did I say that right? Or Sargon?
Yeah, Sargon. Yeah, Sargon. So that's sort of just came from originally came from my military buddies coming up to me and just just over a couple drinks, just talking, meeting up. Like we meet up like once or twice a year, just all of us get together somewhere, and that came from just them having some money set aside that they wanted to put, and I was pretty much tapped out on my finances at that point. Where my military buddies, that's where I brought my first investor capital on, and then those deals worked out, and I was like, okay, I guess I can build a business. I wasn't necessarily looking for like a syndication model, more like JV deals. So I've done 5 JV deals in the last 3 years, and they've just gotten bigger and bigger. So the current one we're doing right now is 12 cabins with the same investor. So that's where Sargon Investments came from. Is like where I've shifted my focus to sort of get to that 650 cabin number is to develop sort of themed communities where they're all permanent foundation stick-built houses, but there's some sort of theme to them, whether it be A-frames, barn-style houses, cottage communities, chalets. I call them micro resorts, but that's where Sargon Investments comes in. That's the capital raising investment side of my company.
Okay. Awesome, man. Awesome. What are the best areas to invest in your opinion? It sounds like you love the short-term rental game.
Yeah, short-term rental. And then when you're looking at market analysis or someone who's going into the short-term rental space, a lot of I mean, whatever real estate book you read, they'll say what in whatever asset class they're like start in your backyard, start in your backyard, start in your backyard. And that's sort of that's true for short-term rentals as well. It might not be directly in your backyard, meaning it might not be in the exact market that you live in. But what I've always told students is that the people that I teach is there, no matter where you live, there is within an hour or two a market where people like to take a weekend or an extended weekend vacation to. And it could be as extreme as 3 to 5 hours. If you look at like New York City, people drive to upstate New York for weekends all the time.
Yeah.
And they drive back down. Same thing if you look on the extreme on the other side, California, you look on the West Coast, like you have people in San Diego that drive up to Big Bear Lake all the time. So that's what I say is like when you're choosing a market, start in your backyard. And if you're in a metro city, I recommend like just thinking about where people like to take weekend vacations to in your area. And then from there, sort of deciding on the easiest way to do it is to decide on a property type, something unique. You can just hop on Airbnb's website and they display the top properties in your market. So you can sort of get a feel for what rents well in your area.
Got it. Do you guys do any midterm or short-term rentals, or I'm sorry, midterm or long-term rentals, or is everything?
So we don't do long-term. Before COVID, I was underwriting all of my deals as long-term rentals. So always think of the exit in mind, right? And I would underwrite them as long-term rentals just in case, like if the city decided to change their rules or something, I could rent it out as a long-term rental. And then if that didn't work out, I would just sell it. With how high construction costs have gotten and everything, and just like how high like just materials and labor costs have gotten, our exit's just selling the property if it doesn't work out there's still an inventory shortage in general.
True.
So our exit's just selling it. So, yeah, it's just that we've done midterm before. We did midterm when COVID originally happened, where we just rented out to nurses. And I'm not against that. Like, I mean, you can do midterm rentals on Airbnb and VRBO. We tend to switch to the midterm model when it's a little bit of a slower season. Say like we're going into the winter season now. I like to find people that like stay like a month or maybe a month and a half, just because it's less maintenance as well.
Yeah, interesting. Do you guys have any restrictions in your city or county for Airbnb? What are they? And do they have anything to do with taxation?
So I don't know about taxation necessarily, but I know the city of Asheville itself does not allow for short-term rentals at all. So what I did was I pulled up the map on the MLS map, and I essentially highlighted Asheville, and then we just purchased property just on the border in the county because it's allowed in the county. Yeah, and I'll tell you, man, that strategy actually helped us out during COVID because I mean it wasn't our intention, but for me it was just I just couldn't afford anything that was closer to the city, so we just went a little further out. When you're investing in a mountain market, people are already used to driving. Like Uber and Lyft is a thing here, but it's not as big. Like people are driving to hiking trails, sort of off the beaten path. But what COVID did was it pushed people out of the metro markets, right? It pushed people out of the metro markets, and people are more comfortable staying in a more rural area as long as they have access to the metro market.
No, that's a good point. So the reason I asked that, I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Louis is one of two cities in the U.S. that has a city and a county. A city government and a county government. It's very strange. Usually the city is within the county. We actually have our own county for the city. It's very, very strange. But again, it's one of two. I believe the other city that does that is Atlanta. But anyway, within the city limits of St. Louis, any Airbnb is taxed as a commercial building, even if it is a residential building in a residential neighborhood. So I was just curious if you had any restrictions like that. The one Airbnb that I owned, I sold. I owned it for about 2.5 years, and it didn't really do so hot, really for two main reasons. Number one, we had a third-party manager, and they were basically taking about 30% of gross, which was high.
Off the top, yeah.
Off the top, gross, right? And, that was high. So that definitely ate into quite a bit of the net. And then the other reason was our property taxes went from $2,300 annually to $7,600 annually. Because again, within the city limits, if you're doing anything less than 30 days, and that's how they define short term, is less than 30 days, you are going to be getting taxed as a commercial property. So I always want to caution anybody that wants to get into this game, look at your local taxes.
Absolutely.
And just because they aren't that way today doesn't mean that they might not change the rules. So, just keep an eye on those things. Definitely not something that's going to prevent people from getting into the short-term game. Lots of people do it, and there's a lot of money to be made. Alex is a prime example here of that. But definitely keep an eye on, the local legislation. So,
and I always think what had and that's a very good point, because it's like what I thought about COVID was like, I mean, every other news thing was talking about like there's a shortage in inventory, and that was one thing that I was thinking about my city would do. Is that's sort of the easy button, that's the low hanging fruit, is to how do we increase the inventory in the city. It's like just make it incredibly difficult for short-term rentals to be profitable so that people sell them, blah blah blah. I don't think it's an effective strategy, because I don't know if that works or not, but that was one thing that I always thought about could happen as well.
Yeah, I'm not really exactly sure why they did it. I think the hotels probably lobbied against it, I would think. I think there's also some reasons, like certain neighborhoods don't want the short-term rentals because of parties. And I mean, there's definitely some reasons that I can get behind. But at the end of the day, this is a free country. You would think that you should be able to do what you want with your property, and it doesn't really turn out to operate that way. So.
And I mean, it's all on the manager at the end of the day. Like because I've stood in front of my county board to get like conditional use permits on our bigger projects. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you need to convince them. And obviously this doesn't apply to the St. Louis thing, because that's the commercial tax thing. But for people who are like sort of in that gray area where you have to seek a conditional use, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that adds some sort of barrier to entry, which is not a bad thing, because you have to essentially convince your county or your city that you're managing the property stricter than if someone lived there long term. And that's what we try to do. Another thing that's just shielded us, and I've seen some people do, is if you have the capacity for it in the capital, you can skip the short-term rental piece completely and just go for a hotel permit. Obviously, that requires a bigger team to do that, but hotels can advertise on Airbnb. There's like a separate section for them now. So I like to say that, like, I like to say I'm not really in short-term rentals. I'm just in hospitality in general, because they're sort of starting to merge now. Because again, you can put boutique hotels on Airbnb and VRBO now.
Interesting. That's really cool. I did not know that. Very cool. All right. So when it comes to building a property yourself, what are a couple things to consider, when it comes to property selection?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is going to be outside of market. So we already talked about market. Is you want to think about access, especially when we're talking about rural areas. You want to think about access to the land that you're considering purchasing, or maybe the cabin. So like, especially if it's an already built cabin, it might look bad. Like, it might look so cool on the listing, right? You're like, you see it, you're like, how this is a screaming deal. A lot of times what I've realized is the road leading up to the property is pretty rough. And you got to think about the whole guest experience, not just the property itself. So what I like to say is you don't want your guests to be driving. A lot of times they're new to the area. A lot of times they're going to be driving in at night if they've been traveling. You don't want your guests to be driving up 30 minutes up a gravel road and they've never been to the area. They're going to be annoyed by the time they even get to your property. And a lot of time, like if they're traveling with a couple, sometimes they're going to be scared, like that they just went through that. I've talked to so many guests and hosts that deal with that. So that's number one. I like to be off of a double lane state maintained road, and we'll put in our own driveway if we need to, maybe like 100 meter, 200 meter driveway. That's never an issue.
So access is very important.
Access, number one. Yeah, I always say access is very important, because again, you got to think of the whole guest experience, and just general stuff like what is the land, like what does the drive to the guest for the guest look like. So like obviously I don't look at every single property that I purchase right off the bat. Like I do my own analysis off my computer, but then the next step is obviously driving to the property to see how the drive is based off of what like Google and Apple Maps give me. So access is number one. And then just general development stuff is just like making sure that there's access to electricity, and the right type of utilities. Internet's getting, I mean, I feel like after COVID, or at least coming out of the lockdowns, I mean, internet's practically essential at this point, some sort of internet connection.
Yeah, which is pretty easy to get in most cases, unless you're
Yeah.
way off the beaten path, which at that point you're going to probably have access issues anyway.
Yeah, I would remarket I would change the marketing completely. That like I would just market it as an off-grid property at that point. So it might not necessarily work for what you're thinking about, but it's all in the marketing at the end of the day if you can't get the property utilities out there. Because if you put solar panels, no internet, and then I mean maybe a septic tank and a well, which all of our properties are in septic and well, but I mean you could just market it as an off-grid property, and
I
I'm sure
love it.
people would love that too.
I love it, man, and I love how you said it's all about how you market it, because that means
Absolutely.
everything. You know,
Yeah.
if you
Don't
market
hide
it,
anything from the guest either. Like lay it all out in the
lay it
marketing.
all out so they know what they're signing up for, and then there will be people that are actually looking for those
Absolutely.
off-grid type of things to get away for the weekend and
Right.
disconnect. And I love it, man. You sound like you're definitely very skilled and have a lot of experience,
I appreciate that.
in this niche. So that's really cool. I'm glad to have you on the show here today. Let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to be condescending when I ask this question, so
Yeah, let's do it. No, I love it.
please don't take it the wrong way. You are already actually mentioned COVID, and how we've had quite the change in the world, the whole world, over the last couple of years. So are short-term rentals still profitable with what has happened in the world in just the last couple of years?
Yeah, last couple of years, and I would even say right now, as we're going through this correction right now. Um, when I say this, people don't stop traveling. They instead of taking that 2 week trip to Europe, they're going to be taking maybe an extended weekend vacation or something. So I think people are always going to be traveling. I mean, our occupancy sort of shows that even currently, and I mean, we're getting bookings every single day. So that hasn't slowed down at any means. What I really like to preach is like investing in unique properties where the property itself is an experience outside of the city that the guest is traveling to.
Mm.
There's a built-in, I hate to use the word recession proof, but there's a built-in buffer there when the property is unique, when you have a log cabin, when you have an A-frame or something unique, even if it's not the structure itself, if there's something in the interior design in the inside of the property that's unique, that will sort of set you apart from the other properties. Because again, people don't stop traveling. So that's what I've always said is like unique markets or a traveling market with a unique property is going to kill it all the time. Where like if you're in a seasonal market, the people will still travel to your area. It's a little bit more competitive during the down season. So the people will be looking at, I say Instagrammable properties where like people can have an experience in the property where they don't have to travel if it's too cold, rainy, or too hot or whatever it is.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I was just curious on your perspective there. So yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So you had mentioned earlier that, during COVID, you guys went to some midterm or maybe even into the winter months. I'd imagine you're still marketing the property the traditional way on Airbnb, on VRBO, and on your direct booking site. Do you guys use any other sites like Furnish Finder or anything like that to try to, locate those midterm tenants?
Yeah, I had a manager actually help me with that. So I mean, that was 2 years ago because we only shut down for 2 months. Once we were done with that, with short-term rental stuff, like short-term rentals were outlawed for like 2.5 months in my city. So not that long. Obviously, COVID stayed around for
They
two
were
years.
outlawed for
Not
two and a
stayed.
half months, so it was just it's a short term thing.
Yeah, I mean, 2.5 months completely shut down, and then I forgot. I think it was like you could rent for like 2 weeks or whatever, but I mean, hotels were still allowed to stay open here for the most part. Like it wasn't like a complete shutdown, right? My wife actually moved. We lived separately after we got married for 6 months. My wife actually moved here to the city. Literally, I think it was March 18th, like 2 days before the lockdown. So we were
Oh
still
wow.
able to get a hotel and stuff when we were traveling down here from Michigan. But yeah, we switched over. We got a couple of tenants in there, and I believe my manager, because I wasn't familiar with like midterm or long term rental stuff up until that point. We just got traveling nurses in there, and what I want people to think about is like with these unique properties or something's unique. I had talked to a student that their properties were really close to like one of the biggest hospitals in the area for like terminally ill children, where like that's what their main guests were, was that was their the I guess the guest avatar was that, which is crazy. So you want to there's a where the rubber meets the road is like there are these websites out there that specifically cater to your optimal guest. So there are, like you just said, there's the furnished website, there's traveling nurse websites. Pure Space is a really one that I actually just started writing on. Pure Space is interesting, and I started playing with. There are all these different websites, and so there are specific short-term rental sites and midterm sites that might be specific to your city as well. That like they're like only for St. Louis, Missouri. Where like so I urge guests or I urge hosts to sort of look into some of those websites as well. Because I think you have a little bit more control over the guests when it comes to those types of people, and especially like we get with like weddings are huge in this area. So like we get with all the wedding planners in this area and give them the link to our property. And we offer them a discount based off like what they bring us. Essentially, they just message us directly. But wedding planners, getting with event planners in your area is huge. Just staying just with any type of business, just staying top of mind with where the guests are coming from, essentially.
Man, I love it. You again, you definitely know a lot about this space, and you sound like the authority in your market, which is phenomenal. Now, you had mentioned earlier some students, so I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about any courses or coaching programs that you may have.
Yeah, so I originally started, what was it, back in June, Bigger Pockets brought me on to write for their short-term rental content. I'm one of the main writers for their short-term rental stuff. And I just started getting, the Bigger Pockets crowd is mainly people who are starting out in real estate in general. So what I realized was a lot of people were just, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time? Can I get 45 minutes of your time? And it got to a point where it got to be too much. So I decided to put a course together, and I put the course is essentially the course that I wish I had when I started 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of the whole mentality around okay, what do I wish I knew? And what did I need 6 years ago when I started? So I put together a short-term rental development and management course. It's over 100 videos. It took me like 6 months to put together. It has a group coaching. There's group coaching once a month in it. There's templates. There's checklists. There's past interviews that I've done with my mentor, my one-on-one mentor that I pay like 30 grand a year to, 40 grand a year to. All these different things that again, when you get into development, especially in real estate, you don't know what you don't know. So it's like I probably would have saved like $200,000 or $300,000 if I would have had this course when I first started. So that's what I recently put together for anyone who asks me if they can get like an hour of my time or something, just because I'm tapped out right now and working on other stuff.
So what's the course called?
Yeah, so it's the Build Don't Buy STR Masterclass. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes somewhere. A fast place to find it, honestly, if you go on my personal website, for people who are listening, it's alexjarbo.com. They can sign up for the masterclass there.
So alexjarbo.com.
Yep, and then
Build Don't Buy
STR Masterclass.
So is it
yeah,
it's BDB
yep,
STR
Masterclass.com.
And I'll make sure that we put this down below into the show notes. Alex, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more or network or get more information about you, the masterclass, the coaching that you offer, all this type of good stuff?
Yeah, personal site's a good place. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active in the Bigger Pockets forums. If you guys check out, if you guys comment in the articles, I have a YouTube channel that I just, my wife was like urging me, like, you need social media and blah, 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 like actually going through in the process. So I just started, I restarted my YouTube channel where we're just like walking through the process of all of our builds. Cause for a while, honestly, man, it was funny. I was getting a lot of comments from the Bigger Pocket stuff. Like, this guy probably doesn't even develop or blah, 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 like his own property. So I was like, okay, I got to actually show people that I'm doing something. Like I was pretty close to kept everything pretty close to the vest for a couple of years. But yeah, I'm pretty active on my YouTube channel.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. And the YouTube channel is called Alex Builds, Builds.
Yeah, it's a little icon that looks like a treehouse, a blue treehouse.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So again, guys, alexjarbo.com. He's got his own website. He has a masterclass, which is a course along with a coaching program. Again, this will be down in the show notes below the episode here, but that website is BDBSTR, Build Don't Buy. And what's the STR stand for?
Short-term rental.
Short-term rental. Build Don't Buy short-term rental. So BDBSTR Masterclass.com. YouTube channel is called Alex Builds. You can learn more about his business at sargoninvestments.com. That's SARGON investments.com. Or if you want to email Alex directly, alex@sargoninvestments.com is a good contact information for him as well. Alex, what would you say your biggest piece of advice to anybody that's starting out would be?
In anything, sit down. If you're working, like I started working a full-time job first before I got into this, especially me coming from the military, working like 70, 90 hours a week. You need to be able to set anywhere between an hour to 3 hours aside a day to work on something. One of the most influential books I've ever read was The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Very short, brief book, but you need to sit down. My phone is nowhere near me right now. It's like you need to disconnect from everything and just focus on one thing every day, 1 to 3 hours. It could be a different one thing every day, but just focus on one thing for 1 to 3 hours a day.
I love it, man. There's another book that I read recently called Deep Work. And
Deep Work by Cal Newport. Yeah,
Cal
phenomenal.
Newport. Yeah, phenomenal book. And it's very similar, but it just basically states what you did. Like you got to be able to disconnect from all the distractions and get into deep work, which, 1 to 3 hours is a good amount of time to set aside. And if you want to have any sort of success in anything, you need to be consistent with that. And you definitely need to be able to disconnect. So I love that.
I like that book because in the book it talks about like the optimal office, which is literally a box with nothing on the walls, just your computer. That was really funny.
Keeps you from getting distracted. I love it, man. Alex, a couple more quick questions for you here before we wrap up, buddy. What is your favorite word?
Favorite word? Ooh. I mean, this probably comes from the military, but just accountability. And when I say accountability, more like accountability of yourself. One of the best leadership books I ever read was Extreme Ownership by freaking, I'm already blanking on his name, by Jocko Willink. Just essentially owning up to everything. That's taught in the Marine Corps as well. It's like everything's your fault, even though it's out of your control, but just trying to figure out how to, I guess, just optimize your life, optimize your systems outside of the military. I would say accountability. Just
Man,
like accountability of
love
yourself.
it. I love it. Jared or Alex, you had mentioned the B&B formula. You do some coaching with those guys as well? Because I've interviewed that guy on the show before as well.
Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm one of his 6 coaches for B&B Formula. So they do the rental arbitrage model. Honestly, it's become just a short-term rental company at this point because we like all the coaches have such a different like background and stuff. So I teach mainly on like tools and how to optimize your property, financing if you want to purchase your own and blah blah blah. But yeah, he's built a phenomenal community, a very big community of if probably one of the biggest short-term rental communities that exists right now. But I'm very active in that community. If you guys want to check that out, that's B&B Formula. I don't know the exact website, but yeah, no, that if it wasn't for that community, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And I can attribute a couple other things to my success today, but that's definitely up there.
So my last question here, what would be the other things that you would attribute to your success?
And this is going to sound really weird. So I've been a magician for like 20 years. So even before the Marine Corps, I practiced like street magic and stuff. My mom's a school teacher. She's been a school teacher her whole life, and she actually got me into magic because I was super shy as a kid. So she like forced me into being but it stuck with me, man. It stuck with me when I was in the Marine Corps. I just bust out like I would always have a deck of cards on me and everything. And then it's turned into this really cool like networking thing as well, like in the business stuff that I do. And one thing that it's actually really helped me do is like what we talked about is like disconnecting and something about working on like it's like my creative outlook. Like I don't really write too much like for pleasure. I don't really read too much for like pleasure. I read to learn. So that's sort of been my outlet, and it's helped me sort of work through a lot of blocks that I've had in terms of business, where if I couldn't figure out something, just sort of disconnect and just work on like a card trick or something. So that's been like my creative outlook is like magic outside of business, which I think is super important to have in general, just something you can step away from and just something that you can have fun with.
Man, I love it. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know I learned a few things, and I know the audience probably learned a ton of things, guys. If you want to learn more, you can connect with Alex directly on his website, alexjarbo.com. His last name is Jarbo. SaigonInvestments.com. His YouTube channel is called Alex Builds. And if you want to learn more about Alex's course and coaching, go to BDBSTR, Build Don't Buy, short-term rental. That's the abbreviation there, BDBSTR masterclass.com. And with that, guys, we're going to be ending this episode. Do not forget that you make your money when you buy. You get paid when you sell. That is one of the most important rules when it comes to real estate investing. And, we had mentioned this actually in this episode quite a few times, but we are really in the marketing business, right? Before we're in any other business. And I know Alex agrees because he's over here shaking his head, saying, yes, I agree. We are in the marketing business before we are in any other business. So you really need to understand marketing, and you need to get good at marketing. And if you want to build like Alex is doing, then you need to learn how to find properties that are listed for sale, or maybe even properties that aren't listed for sale that you can market directly to the homeowners, right? If you are in the coaching space, then you need to learn how to market to the avatar, the proper student. If you're in the wholesaling space, you need to learn how to market to motivated sellers. It doesn't matter what space you're in, you need to learn marketing. And that is basically what business we are all in before the actual business or product or service that we are selling. We need to understand and learn how to market that. So don't forget. And guys, head on over to discountpropertyinvestor.com to learn more about how you can market directly to motivated sellers, off-market property owners, and get good at finding those deals, because I'm going to say it one more time. We make our money when we buy. We get paid when we sell, but learning how to find those deals is really where we're going to create a ton of success and create a lot of wealth when it comes to real estate investing. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show and being an awesome guest. You provided a ton of value today, and I'm really, really grateful for your time, and I look forward to learning more about your coaching and your course. So, guys, don't forget, check him out, alexjarbo.com. And with that, we're going to be signing off. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. We would also appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you in advance for your support. And remember, you make your money when you buy, you get paid when you sell. Now let's go build some wealth.